nervous because he doesn't like doing them. So when I walked in today, he didn't even say hi. He's like, will you do the intro? And Maitreyi is my teacher. I've been working with her for 3.5 years now, and she's just been a huge blessing in my life. She comes from the Tantric and Yogic lineages of South India, and her first guru was her grandfather. She's been given a lot of titles in India: Yogacharini, Yogacharini. She's written over 100 articles on yoga and mindful living, published in different international publications. And she's the founder of Arkaya Yoga. She comes to Vancouver and trains teachers and healers here in the city. Among many other things, she also runs the Arkaya Foundation, working with youth in the slums of Chennai, India. So please help me in giving a warm welcome to Yogacharini Maitreyi.
Thank you, Ross, for being here and welcoming me in. And also thanks to Banyen for very graciously offering this space for all the beautiful talks. Some of them I've attended as well. Today's talk is very, very interesting because it's very close to my heart and close to the hearts of those I grew up with, especially my grandfather. So of course with my grandfather, I didn't think of him as a guru while growing up because that's all you know. But once I started studying formally with other gurus, that's when I saw the depth of understanding, awareness, and love that my grandfather had for that science. So I feel very, very blessed for my first guru, my grandfather, Krishnamurti, R. Krishnamurti, who just by being around him, I absorbed things through osmosis, I'd like to call it. Not because I just intellectually studied all the scriptures. Of course, he was scripturally very, very well-read, very engrossed in the truths. But just being around him was such a blessing. My second guru, I studied in the Shivananda ashram as well. And then after that, I studied in the Ananda ashram with Swami Vivekananda. And of course, life itself is the guru, as the word guru means dispeller of darkness. So I'm going to make this session a little interactive. I'm not going to be talking for 1.5 hours, giving you too much information. So I'm going to ask you what yoga means to you. You can just, anybody who would like to share can tell me what yoga means to them. Breathing, wonderful, yes. Community, beautiful. And it can be anything, yes. Union, beautiful.
I heard yoke.
To yoke, yes, beautiful.
To the divine or to our reincarnation?
Yes, yes. So the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit word. Is this loud enough, or can you just turn it up a little bit? For those right at the back, I'm not sure. So yoga comes from the root word yuj, which means to yoke, to bind, to bring together. So it is this beautiful union of the individual consciousness with the supreme consciousness. It's this beautiful communion, as Lee was saying, or community, or wholesome coming together. And it is also the step-by-step process by which we can reach that. So that's the beauty of traditional yoga, which says, okay, this is the goal, but we'll also give you a step-by-step game plan. We're just not leaving you out there. And that's why there were many traditions in India where you could learn, not only learn, but live this great science of yoga. Now I'm going to go a little bit into the details of the structure, how you study, just so to give you an overview. Now if you look at yoga, there were different classical schools of yoga. So one of them being Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga. I'll go into the definitions. So Hatha, does anyone know what the word Hatha means? Or Hatha as you pronounce it here? Yeah, the sun and moon. In Hindi, those of you who are from India, Hatha also means Hatta Katta, if you know the word. Like somebody is very sturdy, very stable. So you become sturdy and stable by balancing these two polarities in you. by balancing this masculine and feminine within you. Then we have the aspects or principles of Jnana Yoga. So Jnana means wisdom. And many schools in India, if you see the Jnana Yoga schools, you go there and for years and years, same with the Hatha Yoga schools, years and years you read scriptures. Their basis or premise is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa. So I've taught at many purely Jnana Yoga schools where there won't be any physical practice. So one of the Swamijis, I had the advantage of getting into it really young and being a Yogacharini almost 20 years, more than 20 years ago. So one of them invited me and said, oh, for the teenagers, we can make them meditate for this long because they're not sitting still. Why don't you come and teach them a physical practice as well? But traditionally what they are meant or asked to do is read the scriptures, contemplate it. So Shravana is listen, hear, feel. And then Manana is contemplate it. So that is the Jnana Yoga streams. And then Nididhyasa is when it sinks in and you start living it. So those are the principles of the Jnana Yoga school. Then we have the Bhakti Yoga stream. Now, Bhakti Yoga, you have the Hare Krishnas here, which is very sweet to see because they're all heart-centered. They say anything you want to do, just do it with this unbridled love for the divine, and you'll somehow get there. So that's the whole idea of the Bhakti Yoga, where there's complete, total love, devotion, and surrender to the highest. So how do you do that? Through a lot of chanting, through a lot of dancing, through a lot of celebration. And in all the streams, there's always great food. So don't worry, in any stream of yoga, any stream of Tantra, there's always great food happening. So that's very, very Indian, or it's very culturally ingrained there. So you have these three streams. We started off with Hatha Yoga, then the Jnana Yoga, then the Bhakti Yoga. And then we also have the Karma Yoga, which means that through selfless service for a higher purpose, you can work through your karma, or you work through your unresolved need for attention, acknowledgement, constantly needing that, think, oh, if I do it, what am I getting back? So that need is dropped, and you just do it for the sheer joy of it, for the sheer joy of contributing to the greater good of all. And of course to yourself, if you're contributing to everybody, of course you're also part of that package. So in the classical studies, typically if you go into a particular school, you'll know which stream they're predominantly following. Now in Arkaya Yoga, where I teach, I've just combined everything and I've said, okay, of course there's going to be a lot of asanas, but there's also going to be this framework of Ashtanga Yoga. So Ashtanga, 8 limbs. So this was codified, of course it existed much before that, but it was codified by Patanjali over 2000 years ago. And he very, very beautifully in that classifies Ashtanga, or 8 limbs, to say, yes, we're all going for this goal of liberation, so let's deal with it step by step. So I'm going to go through the Ashtanga. Sorry, this is so cute.
She's deaf, but she's picking up on all.
What's her name?
Her name's Tractor.
Tractor. Oh, Tractor. Adorable Tractor. No. We can all, give some attention to the sweet one. So coming back to Ashtanga Yoga, for those of you who can see, there's a sweet little puppy here. That's what we're laughing at. Yoga? Oh, yeah. Yoga for dogs. Okay, that's a good question. Do we have yoga for...
I've seen that somewhere.
Yes, there's a lot. I think in New York it started because people had more of a relationship with the dogs than others. So. I'm just joking. You get to know my quirky sense of humor after. Yeah. But it's really sweet. If you are calm, if you're composed, and you work with the dog also calms down. So it's really great to do it with your children, your other children who are here. And it's a wonderful way of bonding and communing. So coming back to the Ashtanga Yoga system. So we saw that Ashtanga means 8 limbs, and there too it's a very beautiful and step-by-step methodology of reaching this goal. So as Patanjali put his sutras together, you can't learn any asanas there because it's all indicative. It gives you an idea of what things are. So you have to study with the guru for all the practices. But it leads you into the truth. So he said, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. So that's how he explains yoga. So he says yoga is the stilling of the whirlpools or the aberrations of the subconscious mind. So it's quite beautiful to see how he describes yoga. He says, okay, there's all this aberration. One aberration can be, I'm a woman. It's not a bad aberration, it's just an identification. So he says, oh, the aberrations are usually identification because we identify with the country or the place or the form we are born into. One aberration can be possibly a little more negative, where we say, oh, I'm terrible, I'm not good at math, I don't know, whatever other negative things you feed yourself. Or the aberration can be positive as well. But it's still an aberration. So he says the more these aberrations or these fluctuations of the mind are there, the less you will be able to see this divine shining through you. It's like a still, clear lake. When you look at a still, clear lake, you're much better able to see your own reflection. Otherwise, if there's all that trauma, somebody's constantly throwing stones or traumatizing the lake. I'm just using the word trauma. It could be pretty to throw stones, but I'm just giving the analogy for what happens in our unconscious minds. If somebody's constantly poking you, jabbing at you, or you're not having healthy boundaries, then more the aberration or the fluctuation in the mind. And that's why these practices are so invaluable for you to come back to that clear, still space. So just talking about the mind, I'm going to ask Ross to read a little poem, which I will hand to him when I find it. Dancing. Yes. So the storms that never came. Whatever you're comfortable.
It's called The Storms That Never Came. Bent, burdened with anguish. Crooked frames that held decades of grief. Hearts crouched over themselves for protection. From the storms that arrived as well as the ones the mind decreed. Their apparent wrath pulling at the scabs of wounds that were yet to heal. Raw and open I stood contemplating my own whirlpools as well as humanity's. Instantly a path I see to the sea, I descend to touch, and trust the angels of the water and the earth again. Through freezing, connected hands, a release. Grateful, I savor my pumpkin-spiced karma cookie. Should I read the part afterwards?
Yes, please.
I saw a man bent and crooked as I was walking. He reminded me of an older woman I had seen some months before. That sight triggered some grief in me. He was with a young boy, and it did not seem that this time I needed to physically reach out. So sent him a prayer and walked to the beach. The last couple of days, being warned of impending storms, reminded me of the Chennai floods and other storms this year. So grateful it missed us. And glad I live in Kits, where even cookies are named after yogic principles.
It's true. I was so surprised. I walked into the store called Sejuiced, and it was this karma cookie. I was like, what?
Seduced.
Pardon?
Yeah, I know.
You know the place, yes, yeah. So this is an aside to the whole thing. I used to teach in different countries, and I was sharing with my group of teacher trainers and trainees about how in different places there's a different vibe, right? So in some places, yes, Sweden was very lovely, people were open, Dubai was also very lovely, but sometimes people will come like in full makeup for a class. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting vibe. Not good or bad, just what it is. And then when I came to Vancouver, even if they're not doing yoga, they're still in yoga pants. I'm like, this is my place. I was like, this is great. So coming back to the Ashtanga Yoga system, and we'll look at these 8 limbs of Ashtanga. So the first 4 limbs I'd like to go into the details of, and then we'll go a little bit into Tantra. That's another interesting thing when I came to the West. It was quite an eye-opener for me, the Tantra of the West. So if you look at the Ashtanga Yoga, it is 8 angas, and the first 4 are Yama, Niyama, Asana, and Pranayama. So you don't have to remember all of this. If you do want information, Ross or I or Kiana or Tina can email you. So if you look at the first 2, that is also part of Hatha Yoga. So if you look at the asana and pranayama, even pranayama I would say is not given too much importance in the West. But asana has somehow become the king or the queen of the palace, where that's the sole focus. So if you look at the first 2, yama, usually they translate it differently, but I translate it as conscious boundary setting and restraining our unbridled desires. And if you look at niyama, it is conscious observances or conscious melting of boundaries. So when we approach life in this very step-by-step manner, then we're not saying, oh, love, everything is great, and we're not becoming a doormat in the bargain. Because I've seen many people do that, at least in India. Like I've seen my mom do that, I've seen a lot of women in my family do that, where they say, oh, spirituality is all about love, I have to serve, but they have no voice to say no. Because it's a very, I don't know, Western also, but India more so. Because you're raised like that, to be a good woman, to fit into that paradigm. But if you approach yoga step by step, the yama actually means healthy, conscious boundary setting. So one of the yama, there are 5 yama. So what you're doing is you're reading about the yama, but not just using it as a commandment, but contemplating that yama with respect to your own life. For example, if you take ahimsa or non-violence, so what are the ways in which I am being violent towards myself? What are the ways I am being violent towards another? And what are the ways I am allowing somebody else to be violent towards me and not stopping it, not having a healthy boundary? So those are the things that we're contemplating, refining, and saying, what does violence mean to me? Does screaming mean violence? That only if I get whacked does it mean violence? What am I going to stand up for myself? So this whole process and period of contemplation is what helps the blossoming. Of course, we're not going to go deeper into it in a talk like this, but if you just take one of the principles and contemplate for the week, that will be my request to you. Say, just pick one of the yama. So I'm just going to throw it out there, and then we'll go into a practical session. So we have ahimsa, non-violence, asteya, which is non-stealing. So stealing, not necessarily money, but it can be energy, somebody else's time, of your own time for evolution. Maybe you're on Facebook for too long. I don't know how you steal of your own time. Different things that you do, or just listening to somebody who's a constant complainer. That's also your stealing of your own time. And then we have satya, or truth. So again, you're looking at limited truth, and you're looking at higher reality and saying, okay, what is my truth in this situation? Then you're looking at brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is usually translated as celibacy, but I like to go to the root meaning of it. Brahman Acharyam. So Brahman is this great expansive consciousness.